Good morning, Professor Craig. My name is Juliana Monroy, and I will be speaking about the social issues represented in the Harlem Dancer by Claude Mckay. The Harlem Dancer was a poem written in 1917, 5 years after the author had arrived in America from his native Jamaica, only to be greatly disappointed to encounter the harsh reality of racism and unimaginable Negro suffering that was going on in the American South. He had never experienced firsthand American racial prejudice and seemed to be totally unprepared for this. But rather than returning to the less demanding life in Jamaica, he felt a compulsion to remain and join the struggle, for he was already bound to the American blacks and their bondage. He actually stayed in New York City, where he started working as, in everything that became available to him at the time. He worked as a janitor, and also he worked at a Harlem women's nightclub. Short after this, in the early 1920s, the Harlem community started going through a period called the Harlem Renaissance, or the New Negro movement. The movement was defined as an outburst of creativity among African Americans that occurred in all fields of art, but especially in poetry. Also characterizing the Harlem Renaissance was an over-racial pride that came to be represented in the idea of New Negro, who through intellect and production of literature, art, and music could challenge the prevailing racism and stereotypes to promote the racial and the social integration, and in this way help uplift the race, their race. Claude Mckay was credited by many with having kick-started this movement. Now, stereotyping was one of the big issues that we could see reflected in the Harlem Dancer. The poet's attempt to show the difference between how the audience perceives these black women and who she truly is represents Mckay's attempt to reveal and then shatter a stereotype. The audience views her as beautiful and sexualized, but they fail to see her true identity. They misread her. She seems to represent the historical stereotype of the hypersexualized black women, which was an image that arose during slavery with the sexual exploitation of black women by the slave masters. The audience in this poem is in a way like these historical slave masters, reading sexuality and happiness in her dancing and her body, and failing to see who she really is, and that she was not really enjoying what she had to do in order to survive. Racism was another issue glanced in the poem. Mckay talks about her voice sounding like blended flutes played by black men. We do not assume that the players are black men until he specifically mentions it, which could be seen as a deliberate attempt of the author to emphasize his race and how they are also multifaceted, talented, and worthy of being documented and even celebrated in the arts. Other than that, Mckay uses the Harlem Dancer as a way to express the emotions that he was dealing with at the time, all the struggle that he had to go through during those years, and the feeling of being out of place since he was out of Jamaica, and also the state of shock in which he was for having encountered all this suffering of the African American culture. All this type of writing helped aggrandize the culture of African Americans, and even encouraged them to celebrate their heritage. Thank you.